Hi to our podcast audience and to our online listeners. I've got a favor and an offer to ask you. If you are subscribed via Apple Podcasts, take a moment to write a review. A, we love to hear your feedback. It inspires me and the crew tremendously. And B, we'll put you in the pool that could get included in an upcoming show. Want to hear your review on the air? What do you say? Now, on with this week's show. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real-life models of shifting power from the few to the many in the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, and governance. In 2014, Google spent $114 million on its diversity program, and even more in the years after that. By 2019, just about all the company's 100,000 employees had gone through a diversity training. But the proportion of African Americans in tech roles had only crawled from 1.5 to 2.1%. The truth is, in an era when companies spend billions on diversity, hiring officers, consultants, and trainers, people go to conferences, read magazines, the proportion of African Americans in business leadership is stagnating. And things are no better in education or the arts. So what's up? With so much thrown at the problem, what's been learned about what it actually takes to build an inclusive society and economy? And what do we make of a diversity industry that seems to be thriving while actual diversity, not so much? That's what we're exploring today on The Laura Flanders Show, the show where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome. In her new book, Diversity, Inc., The Failed Promise of a Billion-Dollar Business, award-winning journalist and New York University professor Pamela Newkirk describes a huge gap between American rhetoric and reality, where racial equality and inclusion are concerned. And she calls us to go beyond lip service. Professor Newkirk, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
So you start the book with our desire to believe that these problems have been solved. Barack Obama, Sonda Rhimes, Ken Frazier, what do these people have in common? The first black president, a hit producer, and the black CEO of Merck. They all are people that we look to tell ourselves we're in a post-racial era, but we're not.
No.
You want to lay out the problem as you see it?
Well, I think in the years after the election of Barack Obama, America was quick to wave the banner of post-race America. And many just went with it. I mean, it was the headline everywhere. We're post-race, we're post-race. It's funny that since Trump's election, no one's saying that anymore.
No, certainly not.
Because the reality has always been, we've never been post-race, and now it's even more apparent how far we have to go to become post-race. And so I guess if there's anything good that has come out of the Trump era is the clarity around race that we're now having to confront in this country.
Well, so are all these diversity programs that we hear about helping?
Well, the evidence shows that they're not. The evidence shows that despite the fact that institutions are spending billions of dollars a year on diversity efforts and have been for decades, the numbers have barely moved. Whether you look at journalism, publishing, film, to higher ed, corporate America, the numbers have barely budged.
Talk about journalism for a minute, your field and mine.
Yes.
It doesn't get better.
Well, one of the things that I found that was sort of counterintuitive in my research is that the fields that claim to be most progressive, higher ed, journalism, the arts, fashion, are the least diverse. And corporate America is the most diverse. And so I think many in purportedly progressive fields kind of delude themselves into thinking because they hold progressive values that you don't really need to have racial diversity because we got this. We're good.
That's right.
Yeah.
That goes for people like me who say, well, I understand race in America. I understand white supremacy, so it's fine that I have a TV show.
Right. And it is fine that you have a TV show. What's not fine is to look around in all these institutions and they talk about diversity, but they don't live it out.
They don't only talk about it, they spend billions of dollars.
Yes, as sort of like a replacement for diversity.
Well, let's get to that. I mean, you document in your book how there has been change made in America, just not in this era of Diversity, Inc.
Right. So we made tremendous change after the Civil Rights Movement in the 1970s with all of the efforts that were put into folding African Americans and other people of color and women into the main of society. We made tremendous progress in education and hiring. African Americans like myself finally were even allowed to work in these fields like journalism and higher ed.
You're describing a moment where a lot of people were able to make a breakthrough.
Right.
And then the stagnation kind of set in.
That's true.
So one of the important points you make in your book is let's unpack what we had then that we don't have now.
Right. Well, what we had then that we don't have now is the will. There was tremendous will beginning with President Johnson's Great Society, going back to the mid to late 60s, where there was this tremendous will, a recognition that people had been, by law and custom, shut out of American society. There was that the Kerner Commission report that pretty much spelled out all of the ways in which African Americans had been just denied entry into occupations, fair housing, medical facilities. I mean, there was just this systemic inequality that for the first time in American society was recognized from the very top. And
the Kerner Commission report followed massive uprisings.
Oh, yes.
The other part of that story is there were
absolutely.
movements, there were rebellions.
Absolutely. In this country, no dramatic change has ever come without some kind of major uprising. It wasn't just out of the goodness of people's hearts that things changed. It was this sense that it was not sustainable, right? Because there was so much unrest in this country. And one of the things that's really key to note is that as African Americans made tremendous progress across every social indicator, they did so without whites losing ground. So there's this sense in American society that progress is a zero-sum game, that if they're making it, then we're losing something. And I think that is we're kind of pitted against each other instead of seen as all Americans, you know, rising tide lifting all boats. We're fighting each other for these crumbs while there's massive inequality that affects people of all races. But it's so much easier to look at race and to divide along these racial lines when really it's the economic issues that are dividing all of us.
So in that period since the 60s to the present, we saw a fight in the 70s over programs like affirmative action.
Right.
Talk about what happened in that era, right through the era of Ronald Reagan, through the 80s, and maybe begin with that Greggs v. Duke Power decision in early 1971, something like that, which defined what discrimination was in an important way.
I think the thing that became most contentious were racial quotas. This sense that you're going to set aside a certain number of jobs for people of color, even though they were totally excluded in the first place. It was seen as a remedy, a way to address it. So the Supreme Court has struck down quotas as a remedy for racial. So what has happened is every time there is progress based on a remedy, that remedy is sort of thrown out, and then we have to start all over. But these remedies had borne results, right? And then those results become contested. And so we sort of go round and round and round in circles. We make this progress, and then it's rolled back.
But we've also changed how we measure the problem or how we define the problem. Because yes, affirmative action was a policy, it was an approach that was supported from the White House under the in the 60s, but it wasn't ever laid out exactly how it would be implemented. That's where some of the fights have come in. But there was also this sense that, well, we can measure whether we have a problem by whether we have equality.
Right.
And that's turned on its head, it seems to me, in the courts, as you document in your book, whereas we now have to show, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a racist actor who did a racist thing.
Right. We can no longer consider history and the legacy of racial discriminatory policies that we had on the books up until the 70s. We can't consider the legacy. We can only look at the here and now. But it is the history that we're living with, the ramifications of history.
And if we still have numbers like the ones you've described, we still have a problem.
Right. So we're pretending that we're operating now on a level playing field when we never quite leveled it.
Right.
But we have to act as if it is level.
So in comes Diversity, Inc. Mm-hmm. Describe what that industry, that Inc. part, looks like.
Right. So it's the training programs, it's the diversity czars, it's the climate surveys, it's the, if you work in any institution, you've come across some of this, right? Mandatory programs, you know, it's sort of what one of the people I interviewed, Cyrus Murray, a civil rights attorney, calls drive-by diversity. It's sort of like you check a box, you did it, and then you could just go on. You don't have to actually implement diversity.
But people are spending billions on this stuff. Businesses are.
Yes, but this apparatus is also used as a shield against legal ramifications for not having diversity. What the courts do is they look at the mere presence of the apparatus. They don't really look at the efficacy of the apparatus.
So it's inclusion of the diversity program,
yes,
not inclusion of the actual people.
Precisely. And in many institutions, the diversity wing of that institution is the diversity. Most of the diversity czars are of color, or they're women, or they're LGBTQ. So they put the most marginalized people in these roles, and then they become the diversity in many of these organizations.
And they're to blame if it doesn't work.
And then they are to blame if it doesn't work. And yes, and they're not really rolled into the main of these institutions. They're sort of marginalized, and it will never work that way. You will never achieve diversity if it's not coming from the top of the organization. So
you profile in your book some examples of programs that do work, or of work that works.
Right.
And I think of the University of Missouri director who says you have to have, correct me if I have this wrong, you have to have leadership, resources, and commitment at the top.
Right.
How did that look like
in education? You have to have intention. It has to be intentional diversity. We see that at Columbia University, where the president, Lee Bollinger, had made it a real commitment from the time he became president. And we have seen the needle move on that issue. Is it where many people want it to be? No. But you see a real effort. And what did that effort actually look like on the ground? The way it looks is not to just hire a diversity czar and say, you fix this. It's to hire someone and say, okay, what do we have to do? Where he's part of the solution. He's not farming it out, because it's a leadership issue. It's always a leadership issue. You cannot just give it to some marginalized sector of your organization and expect it to work.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guest this time is award-winning journalist and NYU professor Pamela Newkirk. Her latest book is Diversity, Inc., The Failed Promise of a Billion-Dollar Business. And it's that business that we're talking about. How do workplace diversity initiatives, which have become profoundly profitable, do so little to actually budge equality in America's major industries and corporations? That's the topic. Pamela Newkirk's the guest. For all our lovely podcast listeners, if you've yet to officially take the plunge and hit that subscribe button, what are you waiting for? Just imagine, if you were a subscriber right now, you would have gotten the first read of my latest column, Democracy versus Dictatorship, on the Bloomberg pitch for our election, and you'd be listening now to the special supporters-only extra content from my interview with Eve Ensler, this time about her book, The Apology. So come on, simply search for The LF Show in your favorite podcast app, or go to lauraflanders.org/listen and subscribe. We've got a bunch of direct links that make it super easy to choose a podcast app that works for you. Be the first on your block with fresh LF Show content. And keep up with us through our subscription service. Thanks. Next, how can a landmark racial discrimination case against Coca-Cola do what years of diversity trainings never have done to shift the scales for equality in the workplace? We've got more from Pamela Newkirk on that coming up. Meanwhile, here's Self-Love by Joe Armon-Jones featuring Obongjayar from his album A Turn to Clearview, courtesy of Brownswood. What did they do at Coca-Cola under the leadership of
So Coca-Cola, like with the civil rights legislation that followed the unrest, they were sued and there was a landmark discrimination settlement. One of the parts of the settlement was to bring in a task force to oversee how they were going to correct many problems.
An outside body.
An outside body to sort of look at what they were doing, where there would be this kind of transparency. The problems that they found at Coca-Cola was that, first of all, in leadership, there were almost no African Americans or people of color. They also found that even in the lower ranks, African Americans were paid less than their peers doing the same work. They found systemic discrimination across the board. They found it in hiring, who was even interviewed. They found it in who got bonuses and how much they received. They found it, so salaries, bonuses, everywhere you turned. And so this task force looked at the metrics across the organization, looking at who's hired, how much they're paid, looking at instances of bias. And they were able to detect and then disrupt those instances in real time. So before a job offer was even made, they would have to show those numbers and present that to this body. So the diversity czar was just looking at all of these metrics every day. Like anything that touched an employee, there were metrics along gender lines, along racial lines, and salary lines, and titles. And within 5 years, they made dramatic change.
First, I'm hearing a grievance brought.
Well, yeah.
Some legal exposure.
Yes.
Then I'm hearing some mandated behavior.
Yes.
Mandated by somebody outside or a group outside.
Right.
Then an agreement to participate.
Right. And this task force, they leaned all the way in. They called out every little thing. And
did it matter that Jesse Jackson had a history at the company?
No, I don't think it did. Jesse Jackson became part of the, not the lawsuit, but he called out the company.
He was a shareholder, I think.
He was a shareholder, and as a shareholder, he told them they need to do better on this issue. But no, he wasn't a factor in this. I think they had the right leadership at the right time who really wanted to do more than window dressing, and they had this amazing task force with Alexis Herman, who had been the labor commissioner under President Clinton. They just had the right set of people who were really committed, including Steve Bucciarati, who was the global diversity czar, a white man who really, really leaned into it. And so I think people took it personally.
Did it matter that it's a global corporation with headquarters in Africa and in other countries? They understand their market.
Well, you would have thought, but before the lawsuit, they apparently didn't really care that much about how that looked. And well, maybe they did to the extent that the one senior leader was African American for the African division. So I guess they did.
There you go.
So they did care that much, but there was no other senior leadership.
So talk about it. I mean, talk to our audience who maybe have gone through some of these programs, and
Right.
regular people have a pretty good sense of what kind of program is poo-hockey or whatever the word is.
Right.
And so the effect, it seems to me, of going through those programs that you know are really ridiculous
Right.
is to kind of belittle the whole enterprise.
And it's worse than ridiculous in some instances. It's outright insulting.
Yeah.
And, you know, many studies have shown that when you do mandatory training, not only is it not effective, but it makes the problem worse. That a year after mandatory training, the number of Black and Asian women in particular decreases. So, and white men in particular, it triggers a backlash because, they feel like they're on trial. This is the workplace. This is not your living room.
Right.
This is not your mom.
So should people rebel? Should they say, I'm not going to do it?
Well, I don't know how you do that, but if you're doing the same thing and you're getting the same results, then at some point you should know.
Change the thing.
Change the thing. But instead, they keep doing the exact same things and getting the exact same results.
Be your non-professor self for a second.
Okay.
Because you write, you teach, you've written several books on exactly this topic. You have been trying to sound an alarm about this. Aren't you frustrated?
I mean, I think the book kind of grew out of a certain frustration over this idea of authentic diversity efforts. Like, I just wanted to challenge that notion that you're doing this out of a sense, out of an authentic place. And so I did the book to show the numbers, to show how little has changed, to interrogate the tension between the expenditures, the rhetoric, and the lack of progress. Once that's done, I'm done. That's all I can do. Because this is not a problem that I or any African American or Latino or LGBTQ person or woman, this is a leadership issue. And who is in leadership positions for the most part? This is a white American problem for the most part. And so am I frustrated? Am I disappointed? Sure. But
Add it to the list.
Add it to the list.
You have carrots, but you also have sticks.
Right.
The Rooney Rule is
Right.
another thing that you emphasize a lot in the book.
Yeah, but look where we are with the Rooney Rule.
Talk about it.
Yeah, so the Rooney Rule, this was Cyrus Murray, the same lawyer who litigated the Coca-Cola and Texaco discrimination lawsuits. He and Johnny Cothren, they did a study looking at the number of Black coaches in the NFL where the players, I think 70% of the players were African American, and there had only been in the history of the NFL like a handful of African American coaches. And so as a result of their study, they came up with this proposal that to do any coach hires or front office hires, you would at least have to have a diverse pool of candidates that you're looking at. Sounds a lot like affirmative action, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, so the NFL did agree to that rule.
And there were fines if you didn't.
And there are fines, and that's still on the books. But what has happened is you could just pull anybody into the room and say that you had a person of color. So what
and they never included women.
Well, they have, because they have.
But
been,
the
oh
rule
no, not in the rule.
women.
Not in the, no, the rule does not require women. So what was happening is they were seeing. First, the numbers went up. I think the highest it went to was like 8, which is like 25% of the coaches in a season were of color. Now I think we're down to like 3, and so there have been so many violations of the Rooney Rule. They were interviewing people who would have no chance of becoming a head coach, but
there's a lot of ways to get around this stuff,
yeah.
and we see progress, and then we see back. We just saw it again.
Is, that's just a remedy if you're serious about doing it. It's not a panacea. It's not going to correct the problem all by itself. The will has to come from the team leaders, the owners, it's not going to happen because you have this strategy.
The team leader of the United States right now is definitely not indicating that this is a priority.
Well, I think he's doing the opposite of that, right? He's pretty much demeaned diversity. He's called African countries S-hole countries. He's had a Muslim ban. He just added more countries to the list, Sudan and Nigeria, to the ban. So, yeah.
I don't want to blame Trump for
he's
absolutely
also
everything, but look at
dismantled many of the diversity measures in education. So right out of the gate, he did that.
We just saw another reversal with the Academy Awards. You write in the book that, in 2019, there was some progress. And the woman who came up with Oscars So White kind of retired the hashtag for a while, for that year.
Right.
2020, right back there again.
There we go, yeah. I think we just slip back into custom. It's the way things are done. People think we're talking about overt racism, and we're not. We're talking about the way we live in this country. We're talking about social networks. Who gets jobs? You hire who you know. You hire who you're comfortable with. You hire who you go to parties with. I can't tell you in New York City how many times I've gone to book parties or, any journalistic events, whatever, and I'm the only African American in the room. So who's going to be considered for some great opportunity? Who's going to be thought of? And so a lot of time, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a country where we live in really, really segregated worlds, communities, churches. This is a segregated society for all practical purposes.
But we're also talking about a society where, as you put it at the end of the book, white people have to be weaned off our preeminence, our myth of preeminence.
Right. Well, and it's a hard thing to do because everything in the culture validates that worldview, that there's this notion of European superiority, African inferiority. These are not just notions that come out of the clear blue. They were baked into the academy. They were taught these ideas at places like Harvard and Princeton and Yale.
And then it's reflected back constantly.
Constantly.
Pamela, it's a moneymaker for a lot of people. Do you think we're likely to see Diversity Inc., the corporation, as it were, the business, decline, shrink, go away anytime soon?
The problem is not the business. The problem is the lack of effectiveness. The problem is that we're putting lipstick on a pig. We're putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. That's the problem. This is not targeting the people of goodwill who are working in that field. It's targeting the people who hire them, who are not allowing them to actually affect change.
The book makes a powerful case. I encourage you to read it. Diversity Inc., The Failed Promise of a Billion-Dollar Business is out now from Bold Type Books. Its author, Pamela Newkirk. Thank you so much for being with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
That was Pamela Newkirk, author of Diversity Inc., The Failed Promise of a Billion-Dollar Business. For more information on the book, our speaker, and additional research materials, go to patreon.com/The LF Show. That's patreon.com/The LF Show. You don't have to be a member, but do consider joining. Members unlock special audio exclusives that you won't want to miss. Thanks.